You're able to hear me clearly? You can see the screen?
Yes, but it's not so. I don't know if I can enlarge it from here. Not so. Let me see if I can enlarge the screen from here. Oh, perfect. Good.
Right. Okay. Good stuff. So I'm going to start on with this. So what we're going to do today is obviously start the first unit. This is a particular unit that we tend to cover, more so often in the beginning, because the idea here is that this unit requires a bit of research and some independent in terms of obviously.
That one of the colonists came to study again this year.
Sorry, just a moment. I'm still at work, please.
Okay.
No, come. No, just for if you want to meet him.
I'm sorry, I'm at work, so I'm, using the opportunity to do work.
No, that's fine. If you have somebody coming in and they ask you to stop, then let me know. And you can mute yourself. Not a problem with that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's absolutely workable. Not a problem. So what I'll try and do is I'll try and keep this session brief because we only have you as of now on this session. But at the same point in time, I'm going to cover some of the things that we have to, and then I will send you some additional material so that you can look on this, and then we will continue on the session over the weekend. Okay. Now, this is one of the units which is research. At level 7, when you're doing a master's qualification, the main aspect of covering this unit is to give you some background in terms of how do you look at doing research. We know that when you do any activity which is related to management or in various fields like sales, production, marketing, business development, what you tend to see is that there is sometimes a lot of research which need to be done, or when I say additional study, additional information that needs to be gathered to be able to kind of address issues or problems effectively. Now, having this particular unit is, important in this particular course is because what we want to be able to do is instill the knowledge within the learners to understand why research is done, how research is done, and what are the reasons for which the research is done. And then what we want to be able to do is, in this unit, we want to understand how and what are the methods to do research, whether you will do primary research, secondary research. In some cases, when we get into a bit more detail, we want to understand whether it's going to be qualitative research or quantitative research, number-based or desk-based. And those are the things that we need to understand so that at any given point in time, when you are given a problem or you are facing an issue, when you're working within management,
give me a moment.
Yeah. So you need to be able to understand, how to investigate these problems.
Hold on, just a moment. Just a moment.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back now. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. So at the outset, let's understand why do we do research. There are a few things that we need to look at when we, talk about gathering information, studying, certain issues, or understanding why this problem is coming across. And this could be in any particular area. So a simple example that I would give to begin would be that, for example, when you are, say, working within an organization, and sometimes the organization starts to see a fall in sales or a fall in its customers, in terms of the customers it's acquiring on a monthly basis, there is suddenly a requirement, from the management side to be able to investigate the reasons why this fall in customers is happening or the fall in revenues is happening. And that essentially means that people need to look at reasons of why it is affecting, say, the sales or the acquisition of customers. And in a way, the process which gets started within the company, then in that case is a process which basically involves, research. So here, sometimes you will do a series of tests, or you will look at, a series of questions which will be asked systematically at various steps to investigate, to find out, to solve, to resolve why this drop in sale is happening. And that is where the process of, research actually starts. So let's look at a few slides to dwell into this, concept, starting with the basic definition of research. Now, we know that because of the technology that we have today, a lot of data is being created. And when we look at data, data could be just numbers, pictures, figures, graphs, tables, but they don't make any sense to, somebody who's not producing them, but is just looking at consumption. So if you see a Twitter feed, or if you see something posted on Facebook, it doesn't make any sense to you unless you've added that person as a friend, or it is a friend of a friend or a family member which is actually posting something which is relevant to you because you are able to relate to the context. So similarly, when we see, research happening, what we do see that a lot of data, which is just facts and figures, when it is organized into some meaningful or processed data, it becomes information. Welcome, Omar. So it becomes information. And once that information is further processed into some sort of summary reports, or, in some sort of a format which can be consumed by management, what we do get to see is that that becomes knowledge. So data from, facts and figures, or maybe some, graphs, tables, whatever, from that point of view, getting converted into process, that becomes information. But if that information is slightly old and it needs to be put across into some sort of a context at some stage, when it is processed further for management or for people which can extract information from it to make decisions, then becomes knowledge. So when we look at the concept of research, what we're looking at is research. When we define it, can be defined as something when you are actually searching for knowledge. So in order to understand what is research, we need to know what is the definition of data, what do we classify as information, and what do we mean by knowledge. Now, when you are seeking knowledge, you are looking at studying. So as a learner, I give you an example that some of you are taking up this course, and the whole idea of you doing this course is you want to gain certain knowledge, certain skills, and certain demonstrable ability by studying this course. And in order to get that, what you are going to be doing is going through a process or an activity in which you will read, interact, accomplish, write a lot of material which will directly be related to gaining knowledge. And that whole process that we look at of gaining knowledge through the process of doing independent research, thinking, a lot of brainstorming and attending lectures and reading books would be a process which is nothing but research. So when you look at the definition of research, it can be defined as something when you're searching for knowledge or a systematic investigation that you do with an open mind to gain facts. We are not looking at taking any decision. What we are looking at is how the facts and figures are presented. Those facts and figures have to be put together to be able to understand that these are new things which are coming up, and they then, when are identified, become the process of research. Now, research is of various types. We can do research when I say, and this is something which I'll pull out in a second to do a bit of a quiz. when we say research, there is some information that you have access to as a first person. So if you see an event happening in front of you, and when you're present and you're getting that information or seeing that event happening firsthand, that would be called primary, because you're present at that situation. That's basic. You're seeing it happening. But sometimes what happens is you read about a bit of a news, or you read about, or somebody gives you a call to give you some information, and that information, when it is coming through to you from a secondary source or from a second person, becomes information to you which is coming in from secondary data. That means if there was a friend of yours who's witnessed an accident or an event and he calls you to explain that to you over the phone, you were not present firsthand, but you're being narrated that incident, and because it is coming to you as a secondary source, that becomes secondary information. And that information, when mined further and things like that, would then become secondary form of research. There is something called tertiary research as well. That means some information which has been published over the years has been refined and then retargeted and is reprinted in a fresh format, or maybe slightly fresher version of it, and that would become tertiary research. So essentially, when we look at research, it is a process through which you do a bit of investigative study to find out the reasons, causes, and problems to understand a particular situation. They can be of three types. It is primary research, secondary research, and tertiary research. Now, when we do research from a point of view of finding out the facts, the figures. We also collect a lot of data. And sometimes when you collect data and you interpret it, you are also discovering a lot of information which can then be processed into some sort of knowledge. And that is where the whole activity of research as a process gets completed. Now, if I have to show you one or two more slides in a precise step, if I have to define research, it is also possible to define that it's a series of actions or steps necessarily that you take to carry out an act, effectively an activity to complete a certain project. Now, when we look at this particular definition of research, we are kind of mirroring very close to something called project management. Sometimes you're looking at a project, and that project could be an example on our day-to-day life is you're helping your child to complete the school homework. Now, your main aim is you sit with the child and you help him or her to complete this, the exercises given, and that accomplishes a project, which is a small project that you've helped your child to complete the homework over the weekend. If I look at it from a company standpoint of view, sometimes you will see that a company is launching a product, and that product is a time-bound product launch is a time-bound activity. That means we look at a company like Unilever or Procter & Gamble, and they are coming out with a new type of, soap. And when they are launching it to the market, that particular bit of project that they do in terms of a launch tends to be a small process, and that would be, project. After the launch has happened, everybody disbands, you go into different teams, and obviously, you get working into your day-to-day operations. So similarly, when we define research, we do see that it's a series of steps which are taken to arrive at a particular solution, and they are taken out or done in a very systematic fashion, one after the other, to be able to accomplish a particular task. Now, when I talk research, sometimes when we look at study, some of us classify research as 5 or 6 major activities, but effectively, if you have to define, how the process is carried out, we define it into 7 steps. Now, typically, at level 7, for example, when I say you have to carry out research, is you need to know what are the reasons why you're doing it, what is the rationale of doing the study, and that normally comes across in the background information, or when you define a research problem, or a bit of introduction of the reasons why you're doing this, particular activity or undertaking this activity. After that is done, what you do is you try and review some of the current sources which are available in terms of gathering information. And that gathering of information from different sources to kind of find out the basics about what is prevalent in the market would be nothing but getting hold of existing information, and that is coined or termed as literature review. Now, when you've gathered literature, which is and let's look at defining it with an example here. let's look at an example wherein, have you heard about a company called Nestle, which makes a lot of chocolates and our cereals that we have in the morning? Now, Nestle, for example, wants to undertake a research to bring out a new type of cereal for children, which has iron, B1, B12, and things like that. Now, what they would do is they would first start with the initial study of understanding internally within the company. The product managers would sit down and the relevant people would sit down and say, okay, what we want to be able to do is decide why do we need this particular new product or this type of new cereal, because they would have identified maybe a market. They're getting some data which is coming in as feedback from sales and distributors and retailers saying that there is a need for this kind of product, and that gets them thinking. Now, what that thinking essentially does is it gives them the tools and techniques to start thinking about coming out with this new product. And this process, wherein you're discovering that there is a requirement, there's a gap, and nobody's addressing it, and they could introduce a new product and bring it to market, would be nothing but all about a rationale, why they want the product, where they want the product, where is the demand coming from. So rationale answers all these what, why, where, when questions. The introduction would be what kind of product they could produce, what are the advantages of those products, and there's a blueprint that they will create, which will be like an introduction to starting this project or this research. At some stage, they will need to know that who are the other competitors in the market, and who are the other suppliers who are actually, or producers or manufacturers who are actually producing a similar product. And that is what they will gather a lot of information about from the market, which could be from published journals, magazines, websites, anything in terms of data research companies. And once that data is gathered, that will be put together into some sort of a review that, okay, this is a gap area, this is an area wherein this is not there, this is a unique proposition that we can do. And that gathering of data to understand competition, market, existing suppliers, manufacturers, would be nothing but classed as something called review. What you're doing is you're gathering information from the market to do a review to see if this is feasible, if this is going to be profitable. Now, the third step would be, if you are to do this introduction of the product, and if you have to get into production and look at, actually taking this up as a portfolio, the product managers would sit down, or the marketeers would sit down, and they would say, let's look at testing your rationale. I know there's a great amount of feedback coming in, but what we want to be able to do is, before we get into it, invest millions into R&D and start this process. What we want to do is test this particular concept and the reasons that you're telling us that there is a gap in the market. Now, when they try and do that, that is something which is to look at testing by making a few phone calls, doing some sampling, speaking to a few customers to get this feedback firsthand, and that process would help them kind of put together some sort of a hypothesis that if we are to produce this, it meets this requirement, this is the expected sale, and that would then go across to the management as some sort of a plan. And that third step that we call it is basically looking at formulating a hypothesis to see if this is going to be profitable. They look at the competitors in a bit more detail, and they will also look at preparing solid reasons which will be backed up by some sort of a review to say that this is going to work and this is something that we should do. Now, once this basic bits of the research and the data have been collected, at some stage what we do is we get into actual nitty-gritty of defining, how the investigative study is going to be carried out. And in this case, what you tend to do is you will then look at defining a research methodology. And there is something that we study in the process of research, which is called the research onion. And that is something that I will, out on. And that research onion will give you a clear background in terms of why do we look at, studying this, and then how we follow a research paradigm, we create a research strategy, and then go down to a particular level in terms of understanding the research to be done. And that step essentially would be called, preparing a research design or research methodology. Because we need to have a go-to-market. We need to have a process through which we actually go in and, basically look at doing this investigative study. And this investigative study that we look at in terms of defining the process would be looking at understanding the independent variables, the variables which will affect the study that we are doing, and to a certain extent, influence the outcome of our study. And that process is something called research methodology. After that, we do collection of data. We'll actually go into the field, look at questionnaires, surveys, interviews, through which we do a little bit of data collection. And what we do is we test our hypothesis based on the data which is coming in. And that at that stage, it's presented into graphs, tables, into some sort of a summarized data, which actually triangulates three things. First is it tests your hypothesis in terms of the basics of the study. The second would be it also fulfills some of the research objectives that you have set to do the research or this study altogether. And the third would be to come out with meaningful conclusions towards the study that you're doing. That whether this project will be viable, whether this particular new product or the kind of cereals which Nestle is trying to come out, will that be feasible? Will that create traction in the market? Will the customers like it? And those conclusions which come out from the analysis of the data will then be presented in the final chapter as something called interpretation or recommendations to how to address this particular the outcome of the study. And that is nothing but a 6 to 7 step process that we follow from a point of view of understanding a research when it is done. So you start with a problem, look at a bit of review in terms of gathering information from the market, which is available from published sources, and then you create some sort of a hypothesis or basically a study which will test whether this is feasible or not. Create a research methodology. How would you go out and do it? Whether it's going to be primary research, secondary research, whether you will look at tertiary data, and that will be covered in the research methodology or research design. And once that is done, you agree on steps to how to approach this collection of data. When that data is analyzed, presented into some sort of a finished form and presented as knowledge, that would be analysis of data. And once that is done, you draw out meaningful conclusions to kind of interpret why this study was done and how this study is actually helped address that problem. Now, this is a very broad level overview of how research is done, how many parts does it have, how the study is carried out. And at some stage, when the research is carried out, we look at this whole process of 6 to 7 steps, which are then followed rigorously to try and start a study and bring it to conclusion and get some meaningful interpretations or results coming out of it. Now, one other thing which I will just show you, just to also explain that there are different types of data. So what we want to be able to understand is what data do we consider and call primary data, what data we consider and call secondary data, and what data or information when we look at is considered tertiary data. So I'm going to put this into a bit of a slideshow and ask a bit of a question on with regards to you identifying the types of data that we have. Now, the reason why we want to do this is because we want to clearly understand that how do we do research. Sometimes when you say I'll do primary research, so primary research means you going out, getting information from the customer firsthand. Sometimes we look at secondary research. That means you're looking at doing desk-based research, which is more to do with collection of data, which is already in the published mediums like website, journals, books, or newspapers and magazines and articles. And then we also have something which is called tertiary data, which primarily means that it is a published source, but that could be archived, brought back into life, or it could be something which has been published and a replica of that has been published, and that will be called tertiary source or the third source. So let's look at identifying a few set of data, and if we see what is this. So what do you see on the image here? What do you see on the slide here? What do you see on the slide?
It's clock there, and there's sea and beach.
So basically what we see on the slide is we see basically time, right? The clue is given here, persistence of time. So what do you classify time as? Is it something which is primary? When you hear a news at a particular point in time, is it going to be classified as primary, or is it a secondary source of information or a tertiary source of information? How do you classify time?
Primary source.
That is correct. So time will be essentially a primary source because you're witnessing something happening at a point in time. So if I look at my watch right now, I would see that, okay, the time is 6:30 in the UK, and that is something that you're witnessing firsthand, and that is why time is considered, always in context to primary source. Let's look at, this is a cover of a autobiography of Anne Frank, and will this be primary or why this will be secondary?
Because this is an biography, so this will be secondary data because the data has already been published.
That is correct. So this will be secondary. If this was a novel and not an autobiography, this would have been classified as something called primary data or tertiary data. But because it is an autobiography, somebody has listened and then published it as an autobiography. That is why it is secondary data. That's correct. Now this is a paper advertisement which has been published, long time back. What is it? This is a primary data, secondary data, or tertiary data?
Because it's a published source, right?
Yep. So this will be primary. It is a published source. That is why it is primary. Absolutely correct. Now this is an example of a poster or a postcard which has been published in the 1875. Is this primary or secondary? Or is this tertiary? Imagine if this has been reprinted.
Yeah, because it's reprinted and it's published in the source tertiary.
Yeah, so when it was, absolutely correct. So when it was published in 1875, assuming you're seeing this at that point in time, it could be primary. But because, realistically looking at, I wasn't present in 1875 when this was published. For me, it is tertiary because it has been republished, and that's why I'm seeing it. And that's why it's predominantly tertiary. But yes, somebody who had seen it during that time when it was published first time, it would have been primary for them. So this is the cover page of a novel. Is this primary or secondary?
This is secondary.
This is primary as well because this has been printed and this is something that you go out and buy from the market firsthand. An autobiography is already secondary when it is sent to publishers and when you buy it from the shelf, because the original person on which the biography has been written has narrated his story to somebody who has actually drafted that, and because of which it becomes secondary when you buy it from the shelf. But because this is a novel and the writer has written it and you get it firsthand from the publisher or from the shelves, it is primary. If you see a chart which has been published, maybe on the website, showing some sort of a graph, primary or secondary?
And this will be classified as secondary?
I think this will be classified as primary because if you are seeing it published yourself on the website when you're browsing, it will be considered primary because it is showing live data which is coming out in the form of a linear graph.
Yeah, if it's live, then it's primary.
Live, it is when I say in the context, I should have said this is live, and that is why it is primary. So this particular exercise is primarily aimed at helping you to understand and differentiate clearly when the data is primary, secondary, or tertiary. So when we look at history of television, this is a book which has been published, which basically talks about the history of television, is going to be secondary because you're reading about something which has already happened and for which it has been published in a book, and that becomes secondary. If you see this website which talks about certain news or showing certain reviews of movie, is this primary, secondary, or tertiary?
This is primary, I think.
Well, because you're reading about this in terms of a review for a movie that has already been released, and you see people have already put stars or done some rating for it, to a certain extent, it has already got the opinion of people, and that is why this is secondary. But yes, assuming there's a new movie which gets released today and you see it on the website and you're booking your tickets, that will be considered primary. What about newspapers? Primary or secondary? Or tertiary?
Newspaper, because they're published and they have been, I think it's secondary.
It is secondary because the news has happened and you're actually reading about the event when it is published in a newspaper. Now, if you are picking up the newspaper for that day, and if it's 16th of March and you pick it up for 16th of March, what you're looking at is primarily the newspaper story being secondary. But if you pick up a newspaper from the newsprint and it is 2 days old or 3 days old and you're buying it, then in that case, it could be tertiary. How will it be primary?
Because if it's published in the morning and I got the newspaper in the morning, so this will be
Absolutely
first
correct.
and
If you're writing as an editor, then for you, the news, when you're writing it and you're reading it simultaneously as a soft copy or as a print on the website, then in that case, it will be primary. What about magazines?
magazines, they are tertiary.
They will be primary or secondary. Again, the same logic of newspaper applies. If it's been published and if it's a monthly volume and you see that monthly volume and you pick it up in the same month when it is selling on the, on the shops, then it is primary. But if you pick up a volume, it's January, say for example, it is March, and you pick up a February, February volume, then it will become secondary because it has become slightly old. So this is an autograph which was done by Elvis Presley for a flight attendant of American Airlines. Is it primary? Is it secondary?
This is primary.
Absolutely correct. This is primary. This is being done by a person in hand for a person which is receiving it, and that's why it's primary. So basically now, because of this exercise, you know that primary sources are first-hand or original materials. Secondary sources are accounts written after the facts when they have already happened, and you can see those facts with a bit of hindsight. That means you can revisit them because they've happened in the past. And the tertiary will be that these sources have, any information which has been distilled and collected over the years and stored as information, and you retrieve it. That will be classified as something called tertiary information. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good stuff. So this one, let's look at, going back to the original slide. Now, what is our aim of, looking at studying this particular unit now? Now, I think there are two things that you have to look at when we do a bit of understanding on research. Now, at level 7, you are expected to undertake a bit of a project or some sort of a investigative study, which you're going to do in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Now, the idea of starting this unit now would be to...
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Olenka. Welcome back.
Okay.
The idea of, no problem. The idea of actually starting this unit now, it would be that you could look at a couple of things. So first thing is identify a particular area of research that you want to do. Like Olenka, you're working within the office, you might pick up a particular problem, which is something which is a live problem within the office or an issue, and that is faced again and again. So you could pick that up as an area of research and then investigate why this problem occurs, what issues it causes, and to a certain extent, how these issues can be solved. And the investigative study that you will do will primarily help you reach those reasons or understand those reasons why these issues arise and how they can be, solved. So the basic that I'm asking you to do at this stage would be, when we close today's session at some point in time, my session to you would be to go through the presentation slides that we have looked at and then identify a problem area either at your place of work or in journal, which you will be able to investigate in terms of study. Now, they need to be areas which will have some meaningful objectives. Don't have too many objectives, just have 1 or 2 objectives that you want to investigate. it could be something which I give you a very simple example of. Like in the office, most of us sometimes we face this problem of time management, right? A lot of employees coming slightly late to the office when the office hours actually start. Now, this itself could be a bit of an investigative study which somebody could do in the HR department to say that why aren't employees able to come on time? This could be because of delays in bus, train, the traffic, and these are factors which are causing those delays when you are trying to reach office on time. And this study that you look at some stage, the objective would be to find out how much time is actually lost in terms of productivity when employees reach late, to the office. And that study that you do, you are trying to understand the reasons behind why the delay happens. And this delay then triggers a couple of things. So it has a knock-on effect, and that knock-on effect could be in terms of, the employee not being productive in the office, which means that if they reach a bit late, it takes a bit of time for them to get started, to get used to the office environment. And because of the time which gets elapsed, we do see that they spend less time on the work, and then because of which the work or the productivity is affected. So this is a very small example of a research project that you could do. And then you do this investigation to find out why the delay happens, how many days the delay happens during the course of the year, and what is the total time actually lost because of these delays across the year. And how much does it cost the company in terms of its productivity or the revenue generation because of the lateness of the employees coming into the office. And this then becomes a project. This then becomes a project that you are doing to understand the reasons, to come out with the investigation that why this happens. And then because you collect data, you speak to employees or you speak to your colleagues to find out what are the reasons. You are undertaking an investigative process, which is nothing but research. And the end of it, when you have collected this data, you analyze it, and then you present it in the form of a study, which basically says problem, lateness to the office, objectives to find out how does it cost or affect the productivity in the office. Research methodology could be you speak to employees one-on-one, you do some interviews, maybe have a questionnaire that you develop, and the employees fill up the questionnaire. And then when you analyze the data collected from these questionnaires and interview, you present them in the form of findings. And these findings then give you logical, reasons of why this happens, the solutions the employees have suggested, and then you conclude in the form of, some recommendations to the HR department that some cases, some days when there's enough, it could be, I'm just thinking about it, but it could be some days on which the employees could be given a bit of flexibility to come into the office. And the timing should be actually 9 to 9:15 rather than being, 8:30 or something like that. And those will ease up the pressure on reaching on time and lead to less time wasted. And obviously, conclusion would be that you have come out with some 2-3 recommendations which implemented would actually reduce, the loss which the company faces in productivity due to not reaching on time. So the idea here is whatever project you pick up, whatever research area or issue that you pick up has to be an investigative study which actually covers, these 5 or 6 basic steps of carrying out the research. And the idea there is to get your creative juices flowing to understand how do you collect data, what is the methodology that you put behind it, what kind of research do you do, is it qualitative, quantitative, is it primary, secondary, what is the research paradigm that you apply, how you collect data, and then present it in the form of a meaningful study which actually comes out with some conclusions and recommendations. So what I would suggest as a simple exercise at this stage would be to go through this particular presentation in a bit more detail, understand the reasons and why research is done and how it is done, come up with a small proposal, which is a 1-page proposal, about 200 to 250 words that you send across to me. And then that basically tells me that, in a nutshell, tells me about a couple of things. So if I have to just highlight here, a couple of things, why we want to look at a research proposal. So here what we want to do is have a bit of introduction to the problem, which will be essentially the starting point of why we want to do this investigative study. And then what we look at is the aims and objectives of doing the research. And why do we want to do this particular research? So if you're picking up time management, a problem in the office, you're looking at doing a selective study with anything to do with a topic or an area of interest, that could be forming up and giving you some 2 or 3 maximum research objectives. And then in that proposal, what you're telling me essentially is how will you collect data for the research or for this study. And then you're telling me essentially that this is what I want to do and why I want to do this. And this will be something like a 1-page, 2-page research proposal, which will then give us an idea that is this something which can be accomplished in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And if this can be accomplished in the next 6 to 8 weeks, then I would say, okay, get on with the research and go about it so that this then can be converted into your assignment, which is essentially a project or a research project. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, apart from this, there is something which we have created, which is called the Research Project Manual. Now, this actually details out why you want to look at research, how you want to do the research. And this is a particular manual which I would suggest if you read, do not read anything, but read this particular manual on research. And this will help you understand how to select a topic, what area to pick up in terms of research, how to narrow it down. We do not want a very big study. So I am giving an example of a big study would be that I want to understand, say for example, a research on brand awareness of a particular product like Samsung Galaxy. If you pick up that area, that is going to be broad. You won't be able to complete the study in the next 6 to 8 weeks. How are you going to compare the brand parameters? Look at comparison with the competitors like Apple and some of the other phone companies like Huawei. It's going to be a big study. Now, this is a project at level 7. My idea would be to try and narrow it down to 1 or 2 objectives, and then understand the whole process of how this is done, if at some point in time you have to do it in the future. So at level 7, we want to look at something like about 5,500 words on the research project. A simple example, a very simple example just to relate, which we can relate to in our day-to-day lives. Do you have McDonald's in in your place? McDonald's, yes, or something? Yeah? Yeah. So a simple research project could be that you want to maybe take up a study that why the sales are going down in a particular outlet in McDonald's. Because there's a lot of awareness around people putting on weight and the food not being healthy food. A lot of business of McDonald's is actually going down. So this particular investigation of why the sales are going down in McDonald's could be a simple project that you do.
Well, sorry, on that, how am I going to be sure if the sales are going down when I don't actually know their finances? They don't report to me, so.
Very good question. So what we are looking at is if we are to pick up this as a topic, what we are going to be looking at doing is maybe desk-based research. That means we are going to look at a lot of published data, which is the annual general reports, or maybe get hold of reports from the agencies like Mintel, IDG, and IDC, which basically predict the consumer trend and how the sales are happening in, say, for example, fast food outlets. So here you're going to be looking at reading a lot of information which is already in the published domain. It's just an example that I've given. I don't know for sure if the sales are going down, but in the UK they are going down. So I'm assuming in other places also the sales are going down because people are now shunning McDonald's and taking up Subway and other options which are much healthier options in terms of food which do away with obesity and some of the other issues. But this is an example of looking at a problem. I'm not saying you go out and do that, because as you rightly said, there could be constraints in terms of collecting data. You might have to go and visit the outlet. They might decide not to share data with you or give you information, and that would mean that the result that you're trying to do might not happen in the research. But an area that is of interest, it could be management, it could be finance related, it could be HR related, marketing related, is an area that you have to pick up, which is in terms of an industry. Within that, you choose the sector. When you choose the sector, you have to choose a particular product, a brand, and within the brand, you have to narrow it down to a particular product. And within the product, you have to narrow it down to 1 or 2 problem areas. And that is what you'll have to pick up to do a research, primarily from this unit point of view, or the module that we are doing. We don't want a broad study. We want a very narrow study that you're able to complete in 6 to 8 weeks. And what I'm going to also do is send you 1 or 2 small samples of how you could look at picking up a research area. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yes.
Any questions at your end, Omar?
Yes, sir. Sir, can we suggest a research project now?
Yes, you can. What I would suggest is, rather than giving me a title at this moment, my suggestion would be to write down these 3 things, in terms of topic on a 1-pager kind of a submission. So research proposal, you need to come up with a title, and then you say in 2 or 3 lines why you want to do this research or this study, and that is basically defining the problem. Then what is the study going to accomplish? That you put in the form of 1 or 2 objectives. Maximum 3. Ideally, I would want to say 1 or 2. And then how will you go about it is what you need to put in, the 1-page document. Let me show you. I will just unshare my screen for a second, but let me just pull out 1 or 2 documents to show you how to do a research proposal.
Okay.
While I'm at it, I want to make sure that you see, and this is something which I'm going to send you the email as well. And the idea is I want to basically make sure that you understand what are we saying or what are we talking about when we look at a research proposal. I just want to be pulling out something which I can give you an example of. Now, some of you, I know the reason I'm taking a bit of time on this is I know that Olienka, for example, you're going to do an MBA top-up. The idea is if you do this research project in a bit more detail, then you could submit the same work that you've done for your MBA top-up. You don't need to repeat that module. So similarly, in your case, Omar, if you're looking at doing something on this research, the only thing at the master's degree level would be that this research, which is going to be about 5,500 words, would become a 12,000 word submission for a university. And that would do for your dissertation. When we say a research project at level 7, why it is a project? Because it's a time-bound study, and it is, looking at you accomplishing the 5 chapters or 6 chapters in a shorter word limit. But the moment you look at defining this for defining for a dissertation or for a university, it will become a 12,000 word project, which would mean that you have chunky sections of each of the chapters to be submitted to achieve the whole project. But give you an example of a proposal.
Okay.
And this is, I'm pulling out something. I'll pull out 2 examples that you would be able to see. This is an example of a research project which the learner is doing because she's doing an MBA top-up. And what she's done is she's come up with a example of, say for example, in this case, effectiveness. She's going to study the effectiveness of social media on marketing, and what is the effect of social media on consumers' purchase decision making. And she's going to do this study in a she's narrowed it down because the topic is quite broad. There are lots of social media. You have Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. There are Google+. There are loads of social media channels. So what she's going to do is, how does social media affect consumer decision making? But she's going to narrow it down to doing it only on Twitter and also for a particular company called Virgin Holidays. Now, what she's done is she's formulated a research proposal And this proposal actually talks about a bit of a background that why this is going to be a research and it's an area of interest for her. Now she works in marketing in Qatar, and she works for a large oil company, large electronics company, and there they are trying to experiment the use of social media to be able to reach out to customers. So it's a live project that she's trying to do with regards to some implementation at some stage within her company. So she's given us a bit of a research background. She's formulated one or two objectives that she wants to understand which is the most appropriate channel for social media marketing for her company. And she works in Jumbo Electronics. Omar, you might be familiar with Jumbo Electronics in the Middle East.
Yes, sir.
Yep. So she works within that company as a general manager marketing. And the idea is she wants to say which is the most effective social media channel for us to and how does it affect decision making. And what is the decision that she's trying to do now is to see how Virgin Media Holidays sends holidays online with and then she's drafted some hypothesis how she will test her studies, and then maybe a bit of literature. We don't need that. What I'm asking you to do at this stage is just a 2-page proposal which looks at identifying the problem, looks at 1 or 2 objectives, in particular why you want to do this study, and how will you go about doing the study. Forget this question of how will you collect data, how will you go about study. That is what I would expect you to do in terms of the 2-page formulation of the research proposal. Just about, I would say 250 to 300 words, but it gives me an idea. When you send that to me, what I'm going to do is look at it from a point of view, is this something which you can accomplish in 6 to 8 weeks? Is it relevant enough and covering the objectives which are defined in the assignment? Right? So our idea is this research, and when we do this investigative study, we want to be able to cover all these tasks in that process. And what I'm going to do is when I do successive sessions on this particular unit, I'm going to be dwelling into individual areas. So today what we've looked at is an overview of what the research is, how many parts does the research have, and how the research is undertaken. But in the second session that we do, we will get into a bit more detail of understanding the research methods, the types of research, and what is the methodology that we adopt for doing research or study. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
But the presentation that I'm going to share today is something we do slide by slide, about 5 or 6 slides in every session, so that we cover the whole process of understanding this unit, and then we relate some of these things that we are doing to the tasks given on the assignment brief. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And Olayinka, you missed out on one of the presentations which I'm going to send to you. This was meant to be a bit of an exercise to try and identify how to classify a particular material as primary, a secondary, or maybe a tertiary source. So if I send this presentation is on Moodle. So when you look at it, do it in a slideshow. So when you do this in a slideshow, what will happen is you have to test yourself to identify whether this is news, whether this is primary data, this is secondary data, or tertiary data. So the exercise is meant to understand, do you see time? Do you see time as primary? Do you see time as secondary or tertiary?
Time is primary.
Absolutely correct. So time is primary. So this is an exercise which I would probably say that you do so that you know what are the sources and the various types of data that we can get to do research or to do an investigative study or to basically study a particular issue. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have any questions for me at this moment with regards to what we've covered so far?
Okay, you said based on the slide you just put down, the time slide.
Yeah.
Okay, you said I'm going to do a test or what on that?
No,
I
sorry.
didn't get that very well.
It is not a test. This is primarily an exercise which
You can exercise, yeah.
just an exercise to familiarize yourself with the types of data that you collect. So there are different things which are shown in the PowerPoint presentation, and the idea here is do it in a slideshow. I want you to identify whether this is a primary source, secondary source, tertiary source.
Okay.
It's just an exercise to clarify the concept that we are covering.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, no problem. Any other questions at this moment?
No question for me.
Okay, and Omar, at your end?
Sir, apart from these slides, what other study material should we follow so that we can better understand this topic?
See, this is a particular research handout or a book that we have created, and this is what I expect you to go through, and we will also cover some parts of it in our discussions as we go along covering this unit. Now, this is an extensive book which covers everything from a point of view of how research is done, how you pick up a proposal, why a particular topic is done, and what is the background, how to formulate a research hypothesis, research methodology. Everything is there. So this is something which I'm going to use to teach and deliver this unit. And this is the only book. If you do not read any other book which is on the Moodle platform that we have, my suggestion would be to at least read this particular module or a handout. And this will help you understand how research is done in whichever field or whichever area you work in, and how to formulate research topic, question, aims and objective, and then bring it to conclusion. So this is the book I would suggest that you read.
Okay,
and
sir,
this
I
is
have one more.
I will email you as well.
Sir, I have one more question regarding research project.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it possible that you can suggest 2 or 3 topics for us, or we have to select on our own?
See, in my case, this is a very good question. I love this because there is always areas that I would want my learners to do a bit of research on, because it helps me, to carry that forward in terms of my own research that I'm trying to do. But what I would do at this stage is I will send you 1 or 2 sample proposals. They are going to be from different fields. They are going to be something like, marketing led or, HR led. And I'll send you a proposal which is primarily related to a particular problem in the market. Look at those 2 sample proposals and try to come up with something at your end. If you're not able to do so, then what I would definitely help you do is crystallize a particular topic that is an area of your interest that you can do research in, and that will also cover and meet the requirements of the task in terms of the assignment.
Okay, that's fine.
But let's keep it open so that I want you to think about it, and I will give you some details, in terms of sample ideas or, some sample research topics. But if you do not find them to be relevant or areas of interest, then look at something similar and create something that you can do a bit of investigative study on, and that would kind of become your research project.
Okay.
Okay. Simple. You have to look at, there are lots of problems around you in our life, in the office, in the place of work, with friends and family. All you have to do is pick up an issue which is a little bit of a generic issue, but with specific objectives, and that then could be easily formulated into a research topic.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are lots of things like office relocation project. You're looking at your company is moving into a new office. There's a bit of relocation happening, but why is the relocation being looked at? That's an area of research. Maybe to reduce costs becomes an objective. To make it more accessible to employees to come into the office, another objective. This is a simple research project. But those are ideas I think you'll have to look at, and when you go through the presentation, and then obviously this particular module guide, it will help you to formulate a particular topic, and I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to come up with something that is an area of interest for you. Okay.
Okay.
Good stuff. Any questions on this so far?
No, I'm good.
Okay. let me ask you this quick question. Omar, are you okay with the, the pace at which this has happened? Because I know that Anjum has delivered a few sessions. Now I'm going to deliver this particular unit and we'll have somebody else delivering others. So are you happy with the delivery speed?
Yes, it's good.
You're okay? Okay. Alayinka, this is, I know, your first unit in the first session. I know you're in the office as well, you're working, but taking out the time. But are you happy with the speed and are you able to understand everything?
Okay. Yes. I'm okay with it. Yes, no problem.
Okay, good stuff. I'll try and make it more interactive. I know some part of it is quite abstract today because of the nature of the that we've started, but I think I'm going to make it a bit more interactive in the second session.
Okay.
Some more details of the unit. Okay?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining in this session today, guys. I will catch up with you in the next one. But in the meanwhile, look out for an email that I will send you with this module guide, the presentation, and 1 or 2 sample proposals to start thinking about what your research area will be.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
I'll catch up with you.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
all right, bye-bye.